She literally just shared an update. Like, sorry guys, before we even start, like Sarah, literally as we're recording, Sarah just sent an update saying that the draft is done. I haven't even had a chance to look at it. Like, I know.
Okay, hold on.
And sorry, the book is called ACOTAR 6 to 8. And then she pops a bottle of champagne.
Okay.
And she looks like she's in like a place with like.
Okay, it's yes.
Have you seen it?
Yes. Hold on. I'm trying to see if anything. Like I see the tattoos on her fingers, and so like I'm looking for clues, of course.
So it's literally there is like a book that has yet again it's like pine trees and lakes and
she looks like she's in somewhere that would look like the cabin. Like wherever she is, it like looks like what I think Valaris in the cabin would look like in the mountains. Like
yeah, for sure. I cannot
That's
believe it. At least, I mean, we've been waiting for an update for so long, so insanely long, and I cannot believe it's been in the last hour. Like, that's...
And I'm just watching it over and over again because I'm like, maybe there's a tiny Easter egg and I'm going to miss it.
I know. Well, there's like looking at, okay, she's wearing like her purple ring, dust coat, purple like Bryce, because Bryce's nails, like she always uses, and the really interesting thing is the book says 6 to 8. ACOTAR 6 to 8. Are you telling us that ACOTAR is going to go for
We're going to have to read one more book.
And she
it would have to be. I mean, what else would it mean?
She also says first drafts, plural. Drafts of all these books.
Plural. First draft. Okay. Hold on. You're right. All right. She has y'all already made this, but she has the 8-pointed star on her middle finger right here.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that I see? I mean, the symbol on her finger, the arrow like this is typically a blade symbol. So, like you've got a blade and you've got the star. I think I'm sitting here looking for like symbols that are like Bryceriel symbols, like hiding on her hands or something. Like written.
Well, anyway, but that just happened in the middle of our recording, so that's going to massively influence where we're at. But okay, welcome to part 2 of our Bryceriel episode today. We are yet again joined by the Marvelous Mrs Meghan to finish off our literary analysis of Bryce and Azriel. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Now, so I guess quickly for everyone, hopefully you've jumped straight from the last episode into this episode, but do you want to give just a quick recap on what this literary analysis is and sort of the first 4 steps of that before we move into part 5?
Yes. So highlight, basically the concept is looking at Crescent City and ACOTAR through the lens of strict literary evidence as is based within the stories, using traditional models, symbolism, archetypes, tropes, continuity in the story, foreshadowing, anything that you would basically find in your normal standard fantasy hero journey story. And so beginning with archetypes and then moving into this concept of the reader-writer contract, where a writer basically sets these stakes with us as the reader, that these things are going to matter to their world and these things are going to give us some sort of payoff. It's not like a real contract, but it's like this intrinsic thing into the story, into their world. And then we went into duality, so the concept of light and dark, made and unmade, alpha and omega, these two pieces of a whole that come together for balance and equals. And then through metonymy, which is the concept of objects standing in for a person and representing for Bryce and Azriel who they are as individuals on like a soul-based level, and looking at the prophecy as not just a prophecy about a sword and a dagger, but a prophecy of these two beings coming together and fulfilling a prophecy in a way that's fusion and balance in the universe.
Yeah, exactly. My brain is like only half paying attention right now because all my
Oh,
brain's
that's
thinking
okay.
is I'm thinking we're getting a 6 to 8. We're getting a 6 to 8. Like we have confirmation that ACOTAR is going to potentially continue on, not just for, I'm going to assume that 6 is that's the next book. Like, and then we've also got a 7 and an 8, and potentially Sarah has at least drafted all those 3 books.
Right.
So she's obviously at least to the point that she's got a plan for what is going to continue on with this story. What we can tell that means is that we have a lot more story coming, which is what we've predicted for a long time. That based on what we've already been talking about with the prophecies and that we've only just scratched the surface, particularly with Bryce, but also with Azriel. We do believe that Azriel has this whole story to still go. I don't think his story is going to be wrapped up in one book. It's going to be potentially multiple books, that he is really our next main MMC that we haven't yet had a proper introduction to. But obviously so interesting. I think, you've been able to beautifully bring together all the pieces that I guess as Bryceriels that we've been talking about for a long time of why we see this beautiful balance between Bryce and Azriel. We've got the yin and yang, we've got the light and the darkness, we've got the shadow and the starlight. We have Dusk Court and potential where light and shadow mingle together, and all these things being spoken about through prophecies, through particular important lines that Sarah is giving us, really from about Silver Flame and then Hofas, really just seeing all these pieces being woven into the story that really give us this belief of potentially where that story is going. So we covered the first 4, and now we move into, I guess, part 5. So do you want to tell us the next part?
So this is going to be like narrative disruption and continuity. So the things in the story that are structural and that we have learned as basically kind of our emotional and metaphysical basis for each series. And what we have learned in that is that there are many ways in which Bryce and Azriel match that continuity, and many ways that Bryce and Hunt break it. And so, in Sarah J Maas's world, we've got this mating bond. And like we said, their fate, they're spiritual. They're like this alchemical being of 2 people coming together, and it transcends logic. It goes past, they still feel it even in death. And so when mating bonds seem to be the most tested are in that kind of life and death situation. And we see it with Feyre and Rhys. We see it with Rowan and Aelin. And then we get this version of it with Hunt and Bryce, and it does not match up to the same level of intensity that the other 2 do at all.
Yes. So is this an example then, would you say, of narrative continuity, that the continuity is consistencies that we see across the books, the things that Sarah, I guess, has a core belief in all her stories that she brings across? Is that really what this is really relating to?
Yeah, and it's breaking the pattern. So if continuity is the consistency that we know, and it's this side by side of this canonical structure that she's given us, and then clearly the ways in which Hunt is also breaking that. And I think there's no way that you can look past that. So like when Rhys dies, Feyre is like reaching through the bond to like find like these scraps of him and pull him back. And she feels like her body is like no longer here, and she's no longer connected, and she's like falling apart. It's not just like sad grief. It's like her soul is shattered, and it's like this full existential crisis. And Rowan goes through the same thing, and it uses the same language. They get the same type of tugging of the bond and fraying of the bond and snapping of the bond, and these are those markers that we've been told to look for as the continuous pieces in her patterns. And then when Bryce dies in Flame and Shadow, Hunt it's painful, but it's not the same. No. And what so fascinating is he says it's as if her maid essence had faded with her death. Not that the bond had faded, not that he had lost that tether to her soul, not that it's he feels the horn no longer connected there, which is really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we never really see that connection with Hunt, and I think there's even a moment where Bryce asks someone, she's like, "Would you feel it? Would you feel it when a mate dies? Like, would you,
Yeah.
and very much outlining that she couldn't
Would you know?
tell if Hunt was alive or dead. She couldn't tell.
Mhm.
Whereas in every other book, we have been told, even Azriel has said, "You will feel it. You'll
You'll
feel it,
feel it.
Kira." Interesting that he even seems to have some concept or understanding of the kind of connection feeling you would have to a mate.
Mhm.
Which
Yeah.
has led many people to wonder whether Azriel has already had a degree of this feeling and connection. But
Mhm.
one of the things we've always seen in particularly Rowan and Aelin and Rhysand and Feyre is this literal tether, this
Mhm.
binding, this light kind of connection, this rope that they hold onto
Yeah.
and pull, and have managed to actually rescue the other by tugging on it, yanking on it. This language being very important, because one of the big things that I noticed when reading House of Sky and Breath, when Bryce lands in Prithian, she very much describes being yanked across, yanked being a
Right.
very important word, because the only
Mhm.
time that Sarah ever uses yank, tug, pull is from a mate's bond.
Mhm. You're right. Yeah. And it's interesting because the similar language is used when we find out that Thea landed at Adis's feet, and we find out she thought it was interesting that fate pulled them or tugged. I have to look at the exact language, but it's a synonym to exactly what happens with Bryce. And I think for Hunt, there's this factor of it, and I always said this before, that it's a little bit of about Hunt is worried about Hunt more than he worries about Bryce. And when she dies, I remember he says, "This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening to him,"
Yeah.
which is just not very mate language.
No, it's
And then
very
he says, like,
selfish.
"What was the
It's
point
quite
of it all?"
selfish. Yeah.
It's very self. And if Feyre died, Rhysand would never wonder what was the point of it all. He would
Yeah.
still be like, "I got the chance to love her." It would not be. I don't know. It's so different. There's none of that same instinct and that same connection and that shared like cosmic togetherness that the other
E
mates have.
exactly. And even the description of their bond, they don't
Mhm.
even pick it up. Rune picks up that their scents have merged. He says, "Oh, you guys kind of smell like each other." Like it's very strange and weird that the way that it doesn't share the other kind of connections that other mates have. They seem to just have
Mhm.
this kind of merged scent, which could possibly be more of a Karanum kind of connection, possibly.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, but we don't see that true, as say, what you would normally get when you actually have mates from the other examples we've seen, where they've had the tether, and as you say, that there's this almost selflessness to it, that you would give
Mhm.
everything to your mate, whereas all Hunt is thinking about is often himself. I always a line he says that just always sat with me was when he nearly hurt Bryce with his lightning. And actually, I
Mhm.
could even go into another aspect again, which is the first time that Bryce and Hunt are intimate is on the when they're in the submarine, and he's gone into this full kind of alpha mode, they kind of call it, but he is like violent and vicious, and he is dangerous to everyone, and the only way for Bryce to actually calm him down in that moment is to actually be physically intimate with him, and this leads to their first act. And unlike other kind of connections where it's very romantic and it's very,
Mhm.
this felt icky. It felt strange. It didn't have that
Yeah.
same feeling. It felt desperate. It felt like this was the only way for her to physically, I think it's what she said before about how everything with him seems to be very physical. And it was like
Mhm.
that. It was like she physically had to have sex with him in order to calm him down. And it just felt
Right.
so inherently wrong.
Especially for it to be the first time that we get it. It's just like it's she's not choosing to have sex with him because of that bond and choosing to consummate the bond. And especially if you look at it compared to like Reese and Feyre, and if you look at it compared to
Nestor
Rowan
and
and Amy.
Cassian, and how it's such a romantic moment. It's not a moment forced on by necessity. It's forced on by a moment in time where they're ready to connect. Their souls are ready to connect and combine. Like,
yeah. And it's funny because Rune doesn't pick up on his bond with Lydia, but they immediately have that soul connection. I love their scenes as day and night because to me it's really reminiscent of, I know people get so icked out by the scene in Frost and Starlight, but of Reese and Feyre kind of together in their minds. To me, I see it as probably the same type of connection.
Yes.
Yeah. And Hunt is very physical. Hunt's physical kind of in general. Like if his thoughts about other people are very physical, he doesn't kind of have the same depth that Bryce does. You know, he would be very happy with her just doing her job and coming home and
being all his kind of, but not in like we love when our MMCs are like, she's mine and that, but but we also don't want to feel like he owns us. We want to feel like there's an equal there. And sometimes it feels like all he kept talking about in Hofast was having babies with her. Like it just felt like he was trying to shut her down and control her in that way. Like he wanted to make her less.
And it's trying in this, like you said, this icky way. Like I come back to when he and Rune and Bryceriel are being tortured, and what he thinks about is sex with Bryce. He doesn't think about her, and you know he sees other female characters, and he immediately like comments on their beauty, or he's just. I don't know if it's something for him to grow out of. I don't know if whatever was bred into Hunt doesn't let him get past that point. Yeah. Does he even have the emotional capacity to love the way that Bryce needs to be loved? If he was created, we don't know.
Yes. And I think that there's he has been built as a weapon, and I think that there is a part of Hunt that he can't control, which is why sort of I lead into the theory that I think he's going to end up being a villain. I actually think he's going to end up hurting Bryce, particularly in a similar way that the Autumn King hurt Bryce's mother. That moment when he is losing control of himself and he is using his lightning, and at the last moment he pulls it back and doesn't hurt Bryce, and then he says, "Oh, I would never hurt Bryce." And the way he says it just instantly made me go, "Ooh, I feel like you nearly did." And I feel like you would.
I feel like you're trying to convince yourself. Like, I don't know that you actually know that. It's like
Exactly. It's like he's trying to convince himself that he would never do that. It's like he needed to remind himself that he isn't to hurt her. He wouldn't. And I think the fact that he had to remind himself of that, it makes it instantly dangerous. And I feel like that's possibly where we're going to see that go.
Well, I think that kind of leads into my next part is the language. So you were talking about the language that gets used. So threads and tugs and echoes, and as much as Hunt and Bryce don't use that language, Azriel totally does. And we get the exact same use of vocabulary for fated bonds. And, you know, she's pulled across, there's the thread between them. We've got phantom touches. And I think it gives us more of there's this physical restraint that Azriel has that Hunt does not have. And I think that's important. And I think it's clear to see that like his wings twitch when he's around her. I think we are seeing him restrain himself in a way that Hunt is not capable of.
Yes. And I think we're also seeing Azriel naturally being drawn, his wings almost wanting to encase Bryce, and he's needing to twitch them to pull them back because they're automatically wanting to go there, and he's having to kind of pull them back and say don't, because he's having such a physical reaction. But as you say, he has huge restraint of himself, and but also so unlike Azriel, he's someone who is so in control. Nestor is looking at him through this whole cave scene Like, she has
Yeah.
never seen him so uncomfortable before. We literally, like, one of my favorite scenes is obviously the bonus chapter between Nesta, Azriel, and Bryce.
Yes.
And when Nesta realizes that Azriel has just been watching Bryce sleep, and she's like, "You've been watching her sleep?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"You make it sound
You make
so,
it sound
you know,
unsavory.
stop." Yes, I just was like keeping an eye on her. Obviously, she's our prisoner. She might escape while sleeping. So that was why I was watching her. Like,
And that I think is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Like,
exactly. And I'm trying to figure this out. Why am I so drawn to this creature that's just landed here? And why is my body reacting this way? Like, I feel like he's staring at her and he's processing a lot. He's got a lot that he's processing in his mind.
I feel like also Azriel struggles a little bit with that. So in the bonus chapter in Silver Flames, like, I think there's something about Azriel that he is trying to understand feelings and emotion, and I think that's where a lot of his like shadows come from. Is he wasn't allowed to express it when he was younger. He had to kind of hold all that in, and so he's figuring it out with Bryce. And I think that's why Nesta also is looking at him constantly, like, who are you and what have you done with the person that I know? Like,
exactly.
yeah.
He's normally this dark shadow that stands in the corner and just watches everything, and he doesn't really communicate. And yes, but that possibly also means that he's a little bit immature when it comes to actually dealing with real emotions. He wants it desperately. He desperately wants to love and be loved, but he hasn't actually had it truly occur because he's never had it truly reciprocated. Obviously, he was in love with more, but that never, and she never really reciprocated that feeling. There's obviously something there with Elaine, but there's complexities because of that she's obviously got a mate's connection that's making it complicated. So he's never really had this chance, and obviously now he's being presented with this, and he's processing all this almost for the first time. And but it's
and holding her hand and pulling her close and doing all sorts of things that
he would never ever do. Like, he is such a, as you say, he is so in control. Everything about him is control. And on the opposite, Bryce is pure, impulsive, constant movement. She does things without even thinking, and she just always makes it work. And that's why they're such beautiful yin and yang, because and she instantly got that out of him. Not only was there just this natural, organic thing where she was just, where he was holding her hand and she was letting him, and not one time does she call him an alpha hole for doing it. But yeah, the way that they complement each other was really so exciting to see.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's really well done. I think it is kind of a thing that you catch when you read them all back to back, and I get fascinated. I feel like people need to start teaching college courses on Sarah J Maas's work, because
get a master's in Sarah J Maas. Absolutely.
That would be fun. I want to do that.
Exactly. It really is. It really is. All right. So, have we kind of covered everything in narrative disruption and continuity? Is there anything else you feel like we need to cover in that area?
Besides, I think we talked on it earlier. No, I don't think we have. The definition of mates, and that angels mates and fae mates are different. And we know that in Crescent City we get this whole section about the word mate not meaning exactly what it does for the fae. And Hunt tells her that angels have mates, but they're not as magic-y, and we call them life partners mates instead of husband and wife. And there is no point to give us that information if it's not to set up a framework for us to understand that mates don't mean to Hunt what they mean to the fae. There would be no purpose for it. And then when they decide to be mates, it is so like anticlimactic, and Bryce is like, okay, sure. And there's that scene where she says, so maybe they were mates by the fae definition, but did it even matter? If it's a mate, it's a mate, and there's not any question if you are a mate. And yes, it totally matters.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think what a lot of people have pointed out, because some people have said, well, maybe you can't have mates, like true mates in Crescent City. But of course, Rune and Lydia prove that you can, and you don't have to be pure high fae in order for that to occur, because obviously Lydia is a different kind of fae in this world, and they've still had that full mates connection. So Sarah has turned that on its head and said you absolutely can have proper mates, but what we have potentially found out is we even get the proof that angels can also have true mates, because we also get that with Danica and
Axiom.
yes.
Yeah.
So we even get proof that you can have a true mates connection with angels, but there's potentially just not one between Hunt and Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think the other thing here that I think is fascinating is the timeline. And so if we're looking at the way where the stories are set up, what is Flame Shadow supposed to be like 6 months or so after the end of Silver Flames, and we get the scene where Bryce asks Azriel, "Do you have a mate?" And he's just, no. There's no like beating around the bush. There's no like, well, there's this girl that I'm seeing. It's 6 months in, and the dude doesn't have a mate yet. So, and if he does have one, he's not going to be in the caves with another woman. He's going to bring her along, or he would have stayed home and sent someone else. It just doesn't make sense, and it throws off this timestamp if we want to move forward with Gwen or Elaine being with Azriel. It just doesn't work. It throws off the entire timeline that she's laid out for us.
Exactly. And my theory, even just from a story perspective, I don't see those stories being anything more than closing off one final book. If Sarah was ready to just finish off ACOTAR and go, right, let's just wrap this up, we need a happy little happy ever after for Azriel, let's wrap it up in one book, that's when she might throw in Gwyn or Elaine. But knowing, as we know now, that there is at least going to book 8 for ACOTAR, there's going to be a lot more to this story. There's a lot more complexity, and there's
at least 3 books.
Yes, that's right. We've got a lot more story yet to come. So
yeah, so we can wrap it up with the last one is the Eternal Return.
Yes.
And this is one of those ancient old literature patterns and myth. It's the idea that certain relationships or struggles or events are going to reoccur, and not by chance, but by some sort of like fated design. And it falls in this philosophy that there are these sacred stories, and in them time doesn't really move forward, it spirals, and something that happened once and was true will be true again. Like, the lovers will find each other, swords will return to their wielders, souls will answer calls across centuries. And so it's not just a metaphor. Sarah J Maas doesn't just use it as a metaphor. It becomes this like actual literary mechanism. And we see it connect also with Feyre in A Court of Wings and Ruin with the Ouroboros, which is this myth of eternity and fate reborn, and it gives us an unending cycles, and Feyre like meeting her true self, because in every age of the cycle we learn that the hero has to face who they are and who they were always meant to be. And I think for Bryce, we see that as it begins with Thea.
Yes.
Thea. What do you say, Thea or Thea?
I say Thea. Oh,
Thea.
Yeah, Thea.
Okay.
Thea.
I don't know.
We know who we're talking about.
Yeah. But she's the first Starborn queen. Yes. And she is this, kind of goddess of light. And she's our star sword wielder. And we're told that I think this is incredibly fascinating, is she rules beside Theon, that he was her partner in the war, but he wasn't her mate. And then that later she discovers that Aegis is her mate. When we hear from her daughter, she told me once, pulled across, they were mates. Their souls had found each other across galaxies, linking them that fateful day, as if the mating bond between them was indeed something physical, which confirms that tug and tether being an actual physical thing. And so it wasn't just like proximity. It wasn't, just for the sake of the battle that she was in. It was this like cosmic need for them to be pulled together. And the universe conspired to find a way to make it happen. And
being pulled together across universes. And have you got, just quickly for this like eternal return, just in everyday kind of pop culture and that, is there any other examples of this kind of eternal return occurring, that like people could compare it to outside Sarah J Maas. I'm not sure if you know anything off the top of your head. I know myself, and I'm not sure if you're a Sailor Moon fan, but are you a Sailor Moon fan at all?
I no, and I need to be, because I've now heard so much about Sailor Moon in light of this that now I'm
Yes.
like, okay, that's
I was
something I
the
need
same.
to
I
do.
was the same. I had not watched it whatsoever. I just sort of heard about it in the 90s, and then a few girls gave me a really thorough analysis, and I actually went and watched quite a few episodes of the original, and
Okay.
understanding that Sarah J Maas was a massive Sailor Moon fan. And when you see it, you get it. You see so
I've
many
seen the
connections.
pictures, and
There are like rings that like power that like, control people, and it's like, oh well, there's Sarah
okay,
class. Like there's all these little bits and pieces that you think, oh, I can see where like the impact came. But obviously the
okay.
main thing is Sailor Moon has like light power. She has the crescent moon and she has the power
Mhm.
of light. And then we've kind of got this tuxedo mask who's kind of
I was gonna say
her
some tuxedo something, right? Okay.
yeah, love interest. And but I think there's this but basically it is ultimately a story of reincarnation, that there were
Mhm.
these two, kind of this queen and king, and then they've almost been reincarnated again to find each other again in the future. And that's kind of what the big epic story is. But of course the ones now, they don't know this, and it takes time for them to learn that they are actually a reincarnation of these previous people, and they need to find each other again in this new world. But yeah, do you know any
Yes.
other examples?
So Tolkien gives us that with Arwen and Aragorn. They are
Yes,
this kind of return of Luthien and Beren. So we've got the elf and the mortal, another light and shadow. They're not the exact same lovers, but they are the same kind of truth brought into a new era, which I think is
yes,
exactly what we see Bryce and Azriel doing. Then for
yes,
myth, you've got Psyche and Eros, and they're kind of torn apart, and then they get pulled back together across realms from that bond. So
yes,
we see that they are not reincarnations in that instance. They are repetitions of a role, but it's all the same idea that this epic connection is going to come back again and again.
yes,
So,
yes,
yeah.
yes, absolutely. So I think you've got here about, why is it Azrael? Why is it Bryce? Why is it Azrael? I'm sure many people would ask
Mhm.
this and say, yeah, okay, this is all great. Love the idea of this story. But why is it
Mhm.
these two characters, and not other characters that we see in these books?
And I think that's the main question. I think if we look back at it, Rune and Hunt are imprisoned. They are kind of cut off from the narrative at this point, and so she's not gonna end up there.
Hmm.
Still weird when she comes back, she doesn't go to them. She goes to her dad, even though a mate should go directly to their mate.
Yeah, exactly.
But not Rhysand, who is the strongest, most powerful High Lord, and not even Nesta, who is made like Bryce is, and not
Mhm.
even Feyre, who has kind of got the same high lady queen archetype that Bryce can have. And then I think one that's, or Amryn would have made so much sense because she has also fallen through a portal and landed in Prithian. Like
Mhm.
they're
Yes.
sharing that similar experience. And so I think it does make sense that Amryn kind of becomes this translator for her. But
Yes.
any of those people would have made so much more logical sense. And they were all free and available because they end up at the river house. It's not like they weren't there for the story.
Mhm.
So, what is it about Asriel that she shows up there? And it's because we know that they are two pieces of that mythic cycle that is fated to return. He's not just in the right place at the right time. I remember somebody said to me on TikTok, they said, well, she didn't actually like fall at his feet. He found her a minute later. And I was
Yeah, close enough.
like, okay, close enough. Yeah. And so, but he himself is kind of, in ways, an echo of Adis. So if we know
Yes.
that Azrael is the angel of death and Adis is a prince of hell, we see that there's that connection there. And if Adis and say are parts of a whole, Bryce and Azrael meet that. And so I think the question becomes then not just why someone else, it's why are we reading this and it feels familiar?
Mhm.
Oh, because we as human beings know the story and we've been here before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. I have to admit that when I first read, so I kind of felt I overheard this theory on TikTok maybe a month or so before Hofast came out. And initially I thought it was hilarious, thought it was ridiculous. And then slowly, as I read more into it, I fully got on board. But at the time, there was the time where we got a snippet of Hofast, and it was the snippet about Bryce running back to Azriel and Nesta and hoping that there was still something left. And I found myself going, why Azriel and Nesta? Like I'm there, and I was just all ready for Bryce to be in Prithian with Reese and Nix, and I had my whole big, that she's gonna be part of the gang. I never in any time had I yet clicked that Azriel and Bryce might have some kind of connection. And so I found myself going, why Nesta and Azriel? Like, that's really weird. Why is it not Nesta and Cassian? Why is it not
right.
Azriel and Cassian? Like, it was
Right.
a very strange combination. Only now, obviously, can I firstly Azriel, I see a connection because I think they're potentially mates. I also think Nesta is her potential future Danica. I feel like Bryce also has the other thing that I think Sarah loves to explore is female friendship and the important connection you can have with friends. And I feel like at this point in time, Bryce doesn't have that. She lost Danica, and no one has ever truly replaced Danica for her. She still has a gap from that. And so I also think the other relationship that's going to be super important for her is that relationship with Nesta.
I think you're right. I also think that there's something to Ember filling a mother role that Nesta so badly needs.
So badly. I really hope and even just the way that Ember stood up for Nesta in that moment where Rhys-Anne was being quite tough on Nesta, and she actually stood up for her, and that was such a important growth journey for Nesta, I think, to actually have this mother figure stand up for her and protect her. You just see how much part of this found family journey is really having Ember and Randall come and join and actually be those, I guess, grandfather almost figures, grandmother and grandfather, that are very wise and caring and loving. And there's so many, even Rhys-Anne needs that. I feel like they all need that figure. And I feel that's another, I really want to see more of that too.
I do too. I think Randall even comments that how much he likes Azriel and he likes Cassian, but what a good person he is. I think we're going to see a lot of. I can see Ember finding ways in the future to like compare Hunt to Azriel. Like, I can see her dropping little like passive aggressive comments. I feel like she senses that Hunt is not who Bryce needs. I think she sees probably some similarities there to maybe even her relationship with the Autumn King. I think he's just a little volatile, and I think she sees that.
Yes, exactly. But just like for many of us, it's very hard to approach that subject with someone when they're in the middle of that relationship and they have their rose-colored glasses on and they think it's all great. It's very hard to bring their awareness to the actual situation that they're in, particularly when they're in the middle of saving the world and things like that as well. Okay, I think this brings us to probably our next step, which is we've obviously gone through these 6 steps of the literary analysis. Let's now just quickly jump into, okay, we've used the data, we've got the actual facts, but what
the evidence is there.
Yeah, exactly. From all that, what do you think? What's your theory on what do you think's next? What do you think, particularly now that we know that there's going to be a book 6 to 8 coming? What do you think is going to be next?
Now that we know there are 3 whole more books coming, so we know that Sarah J Maas has said before that she's considered the idea of mating bonds being broken, and I think a lot of people have thought that that was going to be Elaine and Lucien, and I don't know, but I just feel like it's going to be murkier than that and messier than that, and it's going to be in some way, shape, or form Azriel and Bryce, I guess, because of the broken, but it's not even broken mating bond. But I think that's why we get the definition of mates and why she gives us a different definition of mates. I will say that I don't know that I can say that I know. I know what I would like to see happen. I would like to see I've seen a couple of theories, this world in which everybody on Midgard has to evacuate and they end up in Prithian. And then so, Bryce finds herself as she didn't want to be queen here, but she has to take on this role in the Duskcourt and like step into her being and step into who she is. And I think Azriel will help her there in some way. I think Hunt is going to somehow follow the Orion myth and he's going to die. And if he doesn't at least die as entirely, I think Hunt will die the same way that like just Selena and just Kale could not be. Hunt as who he is can no longer be, and that person is not Hunt as we know him. I think he will become
the good
Orion.
Hunt may die, and we only get left with
Orion.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like. I hope we get something out of. There were so many weird things in this book. Like I loved Therian in the first two books, and she just like murdered his character in the last one. I hope we get something better there. I feel like there's gonna have to be something. We're gonna have to resolve Elaine. We're gonna have to resolve a lot of people for everything to come together. But at this point, if they are not fated mates, everything that I've ever known about literature will just now be confusing because it lines up too much. You can't, and so maybe they won't be endgame. But if they're not fated mates, I don't know anything about.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what journey Sarah's been trying to take. So it would be so profoundly disappointing because to have laid all these Easter eggs and then have it not eventuate to anything or have it eventuate in a different way. Like some people said, oh no, maybe they're siblings, like maybe they're related, and I would be like, that would just be terrible. Like that would not. Why? Like how would that be? A great story. She's really set it up that Hunt is a partner, but he's not an endgame mate. And she's really laid it out that he's not actually that great for Bryce, and Bryce isn't fully aware. And there's even the moment where it's one thing I really like. I feel like Azriel has such an almost like communicative relationship with his shadows, and we've never really seen Bryce working with her light in a similar way until after she's been with Azriel. And then there's this moment where her light she turns towards Hunt and her light dims and she actually says, I know. And I kind of went, why is she saying I know? Like it's like she's talking to her saying, I know that's not the right direction. I know that's not the way you want me to go, but I'm doing it. And I know we don't understand where she's going, but it's just interesting that she almost has this communication with her starlight like it's its own entity and being a bit similar to the way Azriel is with his shadows. I just thought that was a very interesting moment.
It's kind of like that psychology concept that the body knows before you know mentally. Like your body knows if you're in, you move into fight, flight, or freeze or whatever it is in a situation. And I think Azriel's shadows frequently fill in for us what might be happening with him internally. And so I think it would make all sorts of sense for Bryce's light to also be doing that. And so it going out when it sees Hunt is really just not a good omen.
No, not a good omen at all. We have a lot of very negative omens that have just been sitting there and we haven't truly acknowledged or had it eventuate what that's actually going to be. But we are out of time. So thank you so much for joining us today. And everyone who is watching and listening, thank you so much for being here. Please share your thoughts and ideas and theories. What is your thought on the literary analysis? Do you want Meghan to come back? Do you want to hear more about this? Obviously, this is just almost the shallow surface. It sounds like you still have many more layers that you could go into as well. So if you want more on this, please let us know. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for all your hard work in creating this.
I'm glad to share.
We will hopefully get an actual update very, very soon on when we might get this ACOTAR 6 that is drafted and finished. So fingers crossed we're gonna find out more very, very soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.